Okay, so we just started the recording. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our pre-law shadower session. Today we have our lawyer, Jordana, and I'm super excited for this session. I'm super excited for her to talk about her career, her journey into the legal field. I'm sure it's going to be very, very interesting for you all to hear. And yeah, I guess we'll just start. I'll pass it on to Jordana to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Jordana Goldlist. I'm the owner of JHG Criminal Law. So it's a criminal defense firm that's based out of Toronto, but I work throughout Ontario. I currently employ 2 associates and 3 students, and my practice is focused on high-risk criminal litigation, which means most of my clients are charged with either a homicide-related offense or drug trafficking or firearms. So some of the more riskier litigation in the criminal world. So it's a very niche practice, small boutique firm, and we're going into for 6.5 years now.
That's great. Thank you so much for the introduction.
Thanks.
So I guess we'll talk about your career a little bit later because I do want to focus this session more on your career because it's just criminal law is so fascinating to me. But I guess to bring it back a little bit, from my understanding, I know you graduated from Osgoode Hall Law School. So could you tell us, I guess, more about your undergraduate experience, if there's any, like what program you majored in, or if you think there's any specific courses that you might think would benefit pre-law students.
So I majored in philosophy. I have an honors degree in philosophy from York University. I took philosophy because I loved it and I wanted to take something that I enjoy doing. I find that if you enjoy what you're doing, chances are you will do better at it than if you're taking something just because you think it's good for you. So I've always been of the mindset that if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, I'm not going to put my effort into it, no matter how much in theory I want to. So I did not have a major when I got to undergrad. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I took a little bit of everything. I took sociology, psychology, humanities. I think I even took a course on the history of science, even though I'm not in any way scientifically thought sort of geared. Like I just don't think in a scientific fashion. But I took it because I was interested in it. And then at the end of first year, what I loved the most was my classes that were based in philosophy. So that became my major.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think taking classes that you're interested in will definitely allow you to excel in them more. And I think philosophy is also a great course to take for law school because of like the logical thinking and whatnot. I heard a lot of people like tell me that. But I guess just continuing on to law school, like I said, I know you graduated from Osgoode Hall, so I just want to know like how your law school experience was. I mean, I know I'm sure it's pretty daunting for a lot of people, but is there any kind of misconceptions that you think people have about law school and whether or not like they're true?
Um, I do think people have this idea of law school that isn't necessarily true. It's hard, it's a lot of work, it's not impossible, that's for sure. I think a lot of people think they won't succeed in law school. I think the profession itself has some sort of a sheen to it that it shouldn't. I recommend to all students who think they are interested in the law going, once the pandemic is over, go to court and see what lawyers actually do, because there's a huge disconnect between what you watch on Suits and what happens in the courtroom. And a lot of people are wowed into the legal profession by what they see in the movies and see on television, and it's not even close to what real practice is in any capacity. So I always tell people, if you think you want to be a lawyer, speak to lawyers, shadow lawyers. Um, Once the courts, open to the public fully. But even in the interim, if you contact lawyers who are, going to court, they can give you Zoom links that you're allowed to, come into the session as an observer. So with cameras off, muted, but the court is still, in theory, an open process. And so there are means by which people can still see, a trial as it actually unfolds and decide whether or not that is really what you want to do before you get to law school. Law school, obviously, there's no downside risk per se, but one, it's expensive. Two, it's 3 years of your life. And so if at the other end of it, it isn't what you truly want to do from a place of passion, then it's really, a waste of time and money. That said, I can't imagine doing anything else. I love what I do and I'm in a good place for it. So I'm not trying to discourage anyone by all means, but you may have heard a lot about the attrition rate of lawyers. A lot of lawyers leave the profession because they didn't do their research at the front end to see what being a lawyer is really all about.
Mm-hmm. For sure. I really like the advice about going to court because I know some courts are public. And when I was in, I think both grade 7 and 8, or not grade 7 and 8, sorry, grade 11 and 12, I went to a courthouse and I got to experience that kind of firsthand. So I greatly encourage anyone to do the same thing. Now I was reading a little bit about your website, and you said that you always wanted to be a lawyer ever since you were a kid, and there was actually an incident um, with a family member and some other realizations that you had as you were getting older. And I was wondering if you could speak on those experiences and maybe some other reasons as to why you were pushed in the direction of going into the legal field or specifically criminal law itself.
Yeah, I had a family member that was charged like with a criminal offense when I was about 7 or 8 years old. He had to hire a lawyer to defend himself, and for the year and a half that our family was dealing with this situation, the lawyer was like the most important person ever. And I was a kid. I didn't even understand what a lawyer did. I didn't understand the work of law. I just knew that when the phone rang, it was the lawyer on the phone, and everyone needed to stop talking. And oh my God, it's the lawyer. And as a kid, I just was like, I want that. I don't know what this person's doing, but I want to be that important to some other family and be able to help a family as much as I understood this lawyer to be helping our family. Like that's really what I thought they did. And then so from about 7 or 8 until I was about 12 or 13, if you asked me what I wanted to do when I grow up, my answer was always I'm going to be a lawyer. And then 12, 13, life sort of took a change for me. At 14 years old, I was sent to live in group homes, and I dropped out of school eventually, left home for quite a few years. And during that period, I had encounters with the police, including arrested twice myself. I went through the system and hated lawyers throughout my own process because no one explained anything to me and I didn't understand what was happening as I was going through the system. But on the other side of that, when I, was 19 and 20 and decided to leave that life behind and go back to school, I thought that the life that I lived, in those 8 years would have precluded me from being a lawyer in any event. So I really thought that the decisions I made as a teenager were going to foreshadow my future. And so I didn't graduate high school until I was 21 and then went straight into university. And I didn't know what I was going to do. Like I said, I took classes because I liked them without necessarily having the goal of being a lawyer. And then I guess in third year, something was just nudging me to apply for no other reason than I wanted to see whether or not I could actually get in. And so I sort of came full circle at 24 years old when I got accepted and now realized that I wanted to go to law school so that I could help other people the way that I thought lawyers were supposed to help people.
That's a really inspiring story. Wow, that I didn't. There's very few lawyers that come on here and have stories like that. But I guess what you do now, I know your focus is on high risk criminal litigation, so like homicide, drug crimes, firearms, serious kinds of violence, which you could speak on. And like I said, you're one of the very few lawyers that come here who deals with these types of situations. So what's your, I guess, favorite thing about your field and even your least favorite thing about it? about what you do and defending people who commit these crimes.
Allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah.
Just kidding. No, I mean, I do exactly what I wanted to be doing. I get to help people out through the worst situations they could imagine finding themselves in. The majority of my clients are facing life sentence or facing the rest of their life in jail. And so I take on the types of cases I do, one, because I'm very big on building relationships. And when I'm dealing with the work that I do, me and the client are in this sort of solicitor-client relationship for years, right? It's not the type of case with a quick turnover that, you meet with them a couple of times and the case is done. I mean, I have clients that I represent for 2-3 years on one case. And so I get to sink my teeth into the case. I get to take my time with it. And you get to build a relationship with a client that's based on trust, and you build an understanding. I get to understand what their life was like leading up to their charges in a way that you don't get on, for example, impaired driving, right? Criminal lawyers that do impaired driving cases, they don't ever get to really understand their client's background for the most part because they don't need to. And we're talking about cases that are pretty quick, right? Usually they get resolved quickly. So it's just a different way to practice, and it's the way that I always wanted. I wanted it based on a trust and open relationship. And I love the fact that it's high risk. I love the high stakes. It's there's no in between. You can't win a little bit on a murder. You either win or lose. And so it's a lot of pressure, it's a lot of stress, it's a lot of adrenaline to navigate for sure. So if you're not built for that, if you're not able to take the risks, it's not something that you can do. And most people can't, right? It's a skill, and it's part of your personality is if you can sort of go through that motion. And so it is sort of a niche field in that regard. My least favorite thing, I think my least favorite thing is telling a client they have no case. They're few and far between. I think it's very rare that there's absolutely no defense, but it does happen that there's no defense. And it's difficult because you have a client who's counting on you to find a defense or create a defense. And at the same time, I mean, there's only so much you can do. You can't invent evidence. You can't make surveillance, for example, or the role of the police sort of disappear. And so you have to be able to realistically manage a client's expectations. And sometimes it's a hard pill for them to swallow. So that's probably the least favorite thing I do.
For sure. I think we have a question. I don't know. I saw someone raise their hand.
I feel like we have a series. I had a bunch, and then there's
a whole bunch of
Manzill, I think, with a question. I see a hand up.
Yep. And I think after this session, there's going to be a lot. So I do want to save some time. I don't know if we want to get to that question now or if we want to save it till later.
Well, she's got it now. Why don't we have her answer? Because it's certainly better for me than just talking. So.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know if I caught that hand, but whoever had their hand up.
I see her. Manzill, I can see you on my screen.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I wasn't sure.
No, please.
Okay, perfect. First of all, hi. It's so nice to have a proper lawyer come and talk to us because that's something we don't really get in school. So seminars like these are very helpful, especially for a student or a pre-law student who doesn't have any connection or doesn't know anyone in the legal field itself. So right. First of all, I appreciate these seminars so much. Second of all, the question that I had when you were talking about what you like, what you don't like about your being a criminal defense lawyer, one of the biggest things that popped out to me was talking to other people as well is the question of ethics. Especially being a criminal defense lawyer, there's a lot of like ethicality that, from what I've heard, you have to take into consideration. So how do you deal with that? Because I know being a criminal defense lawyer, when people come to you who have been charged with crimes, there's a lot of certainty and uncertainty that you may feel taking on a certain case. So just wondering, how do you feel like do you think that whenever you do your job, whatever case you take, it's always ethically right? Or do you feel, or are there certain situations when you think that your ethics might be like, you might have to push something a little? I'm not sure if that makes sense, but it's just something like, it's very different to like hear about it in theory or learn about it in theory, but actually know how it works out in the real life. So if you could just speak about that a little.
For sure. I mean, there are certain cases I won't take if I think that I won't be able to do a good job. Like if there's something about the case that I think will negatively impact either me or my mental health or my own, code of ethics, I just won't take the case. And I've always been like that. There's always other cases or always other work. So, for example, I won't take cases where it's cruelty against animals. I won't take cases involving children or babies. I just won't do it. It's not my practice and I don't want it. And I know that, if I found something in the evidence that I received from the Crown that would, irrefutably mean to me my client was guilty, I think I would have a hard time defending the person. And as a lawyer, you have an obligation to defend your client no matter what evidence you find, no matter whether you like the person, dislike the person, none of those things matter. Your job is to defend the client whose retainer you've now accepted. So I don't take on new clients without meeting them first, so that I make sure that our personalities work well together. So that's number one for me. Like I said, it's about relationships. And so if I can't trust the client, or conversely, if they can't trust me or don't like the way I practice, they shouldn't be hiring me. So number one, I always have a free half-hour consultation. It's really just about whether or not our personalities work. And then I find, before I even have those, my first question to any new client or prospective client is, what are you charged with? In what city are you charged? Tell me a little bit about the allegations so that I know what I'm working with. Once they're through that threshold, there's very little that can interfere with, my ethics, because if I am prepared to accept the case based on the charges and the client, then, I have one job, and it's to defend them to the best of my ability. The Law Society and the law itself says I can't do things like invent evidence. I can't hide evidence. I can't help people to get away with, criminal offenses. By the time they get to me, the crime's finished, right? They've been arrested. The police are now involved. So, the crime's done. If clients come to me and expect me to do those things, it's very easy to say no. No, I can't help you hide the body. No, I cannot help you make this piece of evidence disappear. I'm not prepared to do that. Number one, for ethical reasons. Number two, for practical reasons. Professionally, I'm obligated to not do those things. So I would never do anything that jeopardizes my career for one case, right? It's never going to be worth it. So I think it's actually pretty easy to draw ethical boundaries for yourself that still fully protect your client, because our ability to defend people, really, as long as you're staying within the boundaries of the law, you do everything you can. And if you're not able to reconcile that with yourself, then you shouldn't be a defense lawyer, right? If you're not able to say that no matter what, I believe in the presumption of innocence, I believe in the right to silence, I believe in the right to not be arbitrarily detained or stopped or searched. If you truly believe, in the charter rights of every Canadian citizen, then you can do this job. If you have a problem with that, like if, certain fact scenarios make you think that the presumption of innocence shouldn't necessarily apply, then you may want to pick a different side of the criminal bar to be working on. Does that make sense?
It definitely does. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right. So thank you so much for your question. We do have some more in the chat. I know Christina asked a question, and it's kind of what I wanted to ask. It kind of ties in. She asked, how does this particular field affect your mental health, and how do you relax and stay focused? And before you answer that question, you seem like a very confident person, and you're going against, the court system, the criminal judicial system. And I think as a criminal defense lawyer, if there's something like a hero or a villain, you are considered, I mean, not to put it harshly, but like,
No,
you
I'm
are
the
considered,
villain.
like,
There's
yeah,
no question I'm the villain.
exactly. Like you're
Yes.
not supposed to win the case, and society, I guess, doesn't want you to win. You know, they want these so-called criminals to get that, you know, retribution and to serve that time in prison. So how do you, kind of like what Christina was saying, how do you kind of stay focused? How do you remain confident when you're going up against, I guess, like society? Never mind the system, but like society as well.
You know, it's gonna sound harsh. I just don't care. As bad as that is, I don't care that I'm this perceived villain, because when you ask those same people, so people say to me all the time, you know, dinner parties, you meet someone and tell them what they do. Oh my God, how do you defend those people? But everybody in this world would want to be presumed innocent unless and until they're found guilty, right? So I say to people, if you were wrongfully accused of a crime, wouldn't you want your fair day in court? And inevitably, everybody says, yeah, of course, if I was wrongfully accused. Okay, but under our system of law, everybody's entitled to that. And so my job is to walk with the person who is presumed innocent all through that proceeding, which means that at the end of my job, a person is either acquitted or convicted. And if they're convicted and I've done everything I could to prevent that and they are still convicted, I'd like to think that that means our system is working. But if there's a scenario where my client's acquitted, one would think it's because he was wrongfully accused, and no one in society wants an innocent person in jail.
That's a really
so that's how I explain it to people, and inevitably people, when they receive that information or that explanation, they have a different appreciation of what I do. But even if they don't, I don't actually care. That's how I view my job, and I love what I do, and yeah, it doesn't really affect me, and that's why I do a good job and have the practice that I do. I don't really care what people think. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. That's such a good answer. I guess moving on to the next question that Isabel asked, it was actually one of the questions that I was meaning to ask you, is that what does a typical day in your career, I guess at the early stages, look like, and what does it look like now? So I guess if you want to do a comparison of when you first started, and then I guess if it like grew, and I know you have your own business now. So what does a typical day look like?
So, I mean, when I first started, and I think this is for everyone, when you're a junior lawyer, you get little tasks and you get little cases, and you have to review disclosure, and you do set dates. So you go to court and you schedule dates for hearings. You know, you sort of start off small like you would in any career, and then slowly you get bigger cases and you start going to trial, usually within the first 5 or 6 months. You'll have smaller trials, simple drug possession or thefts or whatever, where there's not as much at stake, right? So you move up through the criminal justice system, both in the types of tasks you handle and in the types of crimes that you handle. And obviously the more that's at stake, the more you can charge, typically. Not always the case, but that's typically. So you sort of move up. Today, my days start normally around 7 o'clock in the morning, answering emails, text messages, or phone calls that came in through the night. I'm usually busy on the phones or in emails until about 9:30. If it's a court day, I get ready for court, and either I'm physically in a courtroom or I'm sitting in front of a computer by Zoom, as we do now. So depending on what type of matter and what jurisdiction. A typical day in court, if I'm in a trial or prelim, is from 10 a.m., 9:30 or 10, depending on the jurisdiction I'm in, until roughly 4:30. When my court day ends, that's when I again resume the practice of calling people back, returning text messages, emails, whatever communication has come through the day. I promise most of my clients that I return text within 24 hours. So my goal is to make sure that everybody's sort of looked after quickly, even if it's in a cursory fashion. So sometimes clients want an answer to questions that, you know, is a little more weighty, in which case I'm just scheduling appointments. And then depending on the proceeding I'm in, if, for example, I'm in the middle of a murder trial, it's usually about 5 or 6 o'clock at night, sometimes 7 o'clock, that I start preparing for the next day in court. And that just continues. If I'm not in court, then my afternoons are spent meeting with new clients or existing clients to update them on their case. So I have days where I can have, you know, 6 to 10 people in my office, just either signing up new clients or going through their files. And now it used to be that I did everything. So I would do every stage of the proceeding myself. Now I'm fortunate enough to have some great help. So I've got a good team, and we've sort of delegated the work. So there's one person to review disclosure, another person to contact the Crowns and negotiate, figure out what's happening. So that's typical life. And then just when you think everything is planned properly, you get a call from the police that a client's in custody and they've just arrested someone else. And now you're sort of thrown into this urgent situation where you're calling their family and loved ones and letting them know they've been arrested and putting together a plan for their release, which, you know, depending on the Crown's position, could end up taking 2 or 3 or 4 days spread out over a couple of weeks. And so your well-planned agenda of, you know, 2 weeks in the office is now completely dismantled by a new arrest. So it's exciting. It's, you know, something new is always coming up. I love it, but it's the type of job where you need to be able to move quickly, and you're never doing one thing at a time. You're always juggling different balls thrown at you that you weren't even expecting from directions you didn't even know someone was standing in. So it really is, it's the type of job that if that's what your ideal is, you will love it. If you want something that's fast paced and always on the move, there are people who hate it. There are people who hate going to court. And that's why I always encourage students to please speak to as many people as you can and pop your head into courtrooms, even virtually, to see what this actually looks like, because it's the type of thing that you will either love or hate. You're either built for it or you're not. If you are, it's a phenomenal career.
Yeah, I think actually it just, I guess as a follow-up, it's a good time to ask Isabel's question, and Mahdi, I'll get back to yours, but you seem super busy. So she wants to know, how many cases are you typically handling at one time?
So usually 10 to 12 murders, anywhere from 20 to 30 drug cases, I think, and then I don't know, maybe 10 firearm cases at most. Firearm for me are usually connected to a homicide. So, you know, I have 2 attempt murders right now by firearm. I've quite a few shooting cases. In total, I guess anywhere from 60 to 80 at a time.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I used to run a more I used to have a busier practice than that. When I was at a law firm for 5 years. When I first opened my own law firm in 2015, I left the practice with over 120 files just on my own. And I slowly had to like wean them down. And my practice has actually gotten smaller in volume, but bigger in scope. So I'm now doing, you know, large scale projects where we're having to juggle, you know, 5 or 6 terabyte, you know, of disclosure at a time. So we have to parse through. I just got notice that I have a project case, which is these big announcements the police make where they've arrested, you know, hundreds of people at a time. They've told us that there's 35,000 intercepted communications, so like wiretaps, that we're receiving the disclosure on next week, and I only have one guy. So we have to review 30,000 phone calls just to understand this case. So they're huge. They're bigger cases, so I take less number of cases in order to make sure that everyone's looked after.
Mm-hmm. That's a good strategy, but oh my goodness. And are there any cases that I guess stood out to you? I mean, I'm pretty sure there's tons. And I know, you know, if you could discuss, I guess, like one or two examples that really stood out to you, that'd be great. Obviously, if you need to keep them confidential for whatever reason, that's totally understandable. But I guess from those big cases that you had to take on, were there any ones that really stood out to you?
Like stood out to me for what? Like in terms of like what I thought was a good job, a difficult job, a fun case. I mean, I've, you know, things that you might have read about, like I'm not sure what.
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe like a fun one. That'd be cool to see, like if there's anyone that, or I guess like maybe the most interesting, or totally up to you, just one that's like really stood out to you, or stood out like from the rest, I guess.
I mean, I think one of my favorite cases, and I saw someone put in the chat something about defending people who are actually, do you always defend people that you personally think are innocent of the crime? No, most of my clients I don't think are factually innocent. And when they are factually innocent, it's actually way more stressful, especially if they're in custody. So I had a client, 18 years old, arrested, charged with first degree murder, along with his younger brother, a 14-year-old. And they were charged with the stabbing death of a 14-year-old outside of a high school in Hamilton. You may have heard from it. It made national, in fact, international headlines because the allegation was that the victim had been bullied, and the bullying had just increased to a point where he ended up being stabbed in front of his own mother, actually. So it was a horrific set of allegations. But as soon as I reviewed the disclosure, including the video surveillance, it was clear to me that my client was in no way involved in the actual murder. And my client had just turned 18, like within a month before his arrest. So had he been arrested a month earlier, he would have been in a youth facility. Instead, he was thrown into an adult facility with no criminal record, never been charged before, never been through the system before. And here I think, you know, completely wrongfully accused of this crime. And I spent hours going through the disclosure to make sure that I was right about my assessment of the case, and then spent weeks convincing the Crown Attorney that keeping him in custody was wrong. This was a lawsuit waiting to happen. This was an inquiry waiting to happen. And it literally was a case that kept me up at night because I truly believed that this, you know, 18-year-old boy, for all intents and purposes, was wrongfully in jail. And eventually the Crown agreed. It took about 8 weeks from his arrest, but I had the charges completely withdrawn before we even had to go to court, which was a phenomenal result. It was the right thing to do. The Crown took a lot of slack for it. I got hate mail for weeks about how I could get this killer out of jail, and I was this horrible person. And like, I think is, if you really understood what happened during this case and not the nonsense that the media fed the public, you know, everyone would have been outraged that this kid was actually in jail. And it really was, you know, a phenomenal moment for me to have secured that result for him. So that's probably one of my favorites without even having to go to trial. I've had some good trial results too, but that one for me stood out because I really believe it was the right thing.
That's phenomenal. Very interesting. And yes, I do recall that case. And it's cool to know that you were the one representing him. So back to Matthew's questions before we go on, because there's a ton. But where did it go? She asked, do you ever feel in danger dealing with clients in this field? I thought this was a very interesting question.
No, I'm on their side. A lot of people ask that. A lot of people ask if I feel scared, and no, I'm fighting for them. And sometimes I'm the only person in their life that's ever fought for them. So I actually don't ever feel that I'm in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. Let's see. So Alicia wants you to talk a little about your firm. She asked, does your firm give you some freedom? Because I know you said you don't have much time for yourself, vacationing and such. I was always under the impression that, oh yeah, I'll open a firm and let it work for me. So how do you balance that, I guess, with your busy work schedule with time for yourself?
So time for yourself is overrated. Um, when you're passionate about something, it doesn't really feel like work, right? The reality is it's like I enjoy what I'm doing. I don't wake up in the morning and I'm like, oh my God, I gotta go to work today. Like I don't feel that. And the more successful I become and the bigger my firm gets, the more responsibilities I have. But it's like you reap the reward of your hard work and you see it grow. Like I see my reputation grow. I'm winning cases. Like the culmination of all of this hard work is paying off, and the more it pays off, the harder I want to work and the more I want. So it's reciprocal. I do try to vacation, and in fact vacationing is the only time I take off from work in any real sense. So the restrictions have been killing me because I now have literally not stopped working since my last vacation, which was for New Year's Eve 2020. And so it's been like 18 months now of working almost nonstop. So I'm very much excited for vacation, but I don't actually like unplug during vacation. So I get up in the morning still quite early. Um, and I work for about an hour, my usual routine of making sure that like everyone is looked after, returning phone calls or texts throughout the night. But I can put my phone down for like chunks of time. And when I'm on vacation, my clients seem to understand. It's funny. If I tell them without me being away, I'm taking the day off, they don't understand. There's like a huge disconnect. But if I say, buddy, I'm like in Bahamas right now, can I call you next week? Oh yeah, no problem, no problem. So it is my time off, but I never actually leave the office behind completely. I'm never out of reach. And again, I think it's just a product of what you do. When parents have kids, they're locked in, right? You don't get to just like turn it off. If you go on vacation and your kid calls, you still take the call and make sure everything's okay. And I see that it's the same. Firm's like my baby. It's what I grew from nothing, and I can't imagine just stepping away from it and letting it handle itself.
Mm-hmm. For sure. You seem very passionate, which is an amazing thing. Um, and I guess staying on the topic of restrictions and COVID, my question is like, do you see any difference now with COVID, and not just like the technical things, like, you're doing trials over Zoom, but I guess like trends in the different crimes that you've seen, like did COVID affect any of that?
Oh yeah. So drug prices went through the roof.
Mhm.
So my clients that are drug traffickers are making money hand over fist in ways I've never seen. Coming up with money is not even there was a drought for a while. People were really struggling to come up with money when the pandemic first shut down the border. And now, I don't know, I guess they've found workarounds, but the money coming in is just unbelievable. The amount of fentanyl that's coming in to the city is unbelievable. So I get, clients that were typically moving smaller amounts are now being arrested for far more than I ever expected them to have access to. So that's certainly a change. I think for a while, like the proliferation of guns has been significant. There may be more. There's people carrying guns that I wouldn't have expected. Small time dealers who don't necessarily need that for their protection are carrying them now. I see a lot of senseless violence. People locked in their home are frustrated. People are getting agitated. So I have a couple of road rage cases from people that should never be charged with road rage. These are like business owners, people who have, their self together, that just had this moment where they've snapped, and they come to me and they're like, this isn't me. This is not how I normally behave. I've just been, stuck at home, wife, kids, everyone's home. Kids are learning by Zoom. I can't do anything. So I see the pandemic certainly contributing to a lot of frustration that's coming out in, mindless violence. And I think we're seeing it a lot even in the news. I think that we're seeing stabbings up, like random, arson, like things that we weren't typically seeing are now becoming more of a pattern. And I think it is just the frustration of people locked in their homes, unable to socialize when we're actually social beings.
Mm-hmm. It's very interesting to see the I guess the psychological aspects that are associated with the type of crimes that people do. Alicia was saying in all caps in the chat, also talk about your international partnership with Italy. If you want to talk about that, Alicia, I don't know if there's anything specific that you want her to talk about. I know you have your camera on, so if you want to speak on that, if you want to make your question more specific.
Yeah, I just want you to talk about, like, how was it, like, what was the process of you going international to make that partnership? And did you find any more information on how to expand internationally?
So yes and no. So, the international partnership with Italy is really phenomenal, and it was born of the pandemic. So there's a lawyer named Francesco who operates his own firm, very similar to mine, out of Salerno, Italy. He reached out to me saying, I love what you're doing. I'm very similar. This is my practice, my firm. What do you think if we forge a partnership such that if I have clients in Canada or Canadian clients contact me, I can send them to you. It's really a network system. Okay. And I've done the same. And it's amazing, since launching the partnership, I think there's been 2 or 3 clients that I've sent his way. People have contacted me knowing that I have this partnership, saying, hey, I have this legal issue in Italy. Can you please help me? And
what? That's cool.
Yeah, totally random. And he's been doing a great job of, getting my TED Talk out. He's been promoting that in Italy. So now I've got Italian followers on social media that I was never expecting, that say, they've contacted me, through his office, or they've heard about me through his office. Yeah, it's really just a way for me to expand the brand and expand the reach in which I can help people. And so I also have relationships with a lawyer right now in Boston, another in Texas, another in LA. And it's not the same, partnership experience where we're on each other's website and promoting each other actively. But, over the weekend, for example, I had someone contact me wanting to know if I had a lawyer in New York for their cousin who just got arrested. So really random. I don't know, but now I can reach out to my contact in Boston and see if she knows someone. And so it's really promoting a solid network where we can make sure that, more people receive the help they're looking for.
Also, because I'm kind of thrown back as to getting the Canadian, passing the Canadian bar and then doing the US bar exam. So how does the bar work? Because obviously, if you're in Toronto, you can't just come here in Alberta and represent cases, right? Do you have to pass the bar in different provinces in order to practice? How does that work?
No. So if I'm licensed to practice in Ontario, I can get permission from the Alberta bar to take a case there. So I actually have 2 clients right now who are from Alberta. Their cases are in Ontario, but if they wanted my help with a case in Alberta, they could hire me to come out there if they wanted. I could just get permission. The States is different. So the States will acknowledge our JD from Canada, but you have to then write the bar for every state you want to practice in. And I think right now you can write Boston, California, and Florida recognizes Canadian JD. I think
Boston, Florida, and Cali.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Massachusetts, California, and Florida. Those are the 3 states. But you still have to write the bar admissions course for each of those states to practice there.
Oh, I see. Okay. And then I think we were talking about this, about the JD and the LLM. Like you said you only have the JD, right?
Well, LLM is a master's.
So do you think it would be worth doing that, or do you think it's just like
It's an extra year of school, so after you get your JD
yeah, then you do your master's
or LLB, depending on what school or what program you're in, so you can do either, but that's your like first entry level law. And then your master's in law. Your master's in law is really important if you're going to be a professor. It's important if you're going into academia. Is it necessary to be a trial lawyer? Absolutely not, because it's all theory anyways, so it's not going to help you
Okay.
be a better trial lawyer. I know that there are some lawyers who think it will make you a better appellate lawyer, which is a different way to practice. So it really depends what you want. Some people want to just stay in law school longer for reasons I will never understand, because I didn't like law school.
Yeah,
I just wanted to get out and practice. But if that's your thing, then by all means, it's not going to hurt, and it is only a year. But yeah, it really just depends what you're doing it for. You definitely do not need a master's in law in order to practice law.
practice in trial. Okay. Okay, wait, one more question before I let you go. So volunteer opportunities, I found this like really hard because a lot of the times, especially with an undergrad degree, like firms won't even like recognize you or look at you. Like I've gone to a lot of firms and I'm like, hey, like even if you need a paper shredder, I just need my foot in the door kind of thing, right? Does law depend? Because I know some of them look at volunteering hours for their admission. Do you think that's like a big part? Because I know I told you about that crisis responding thing that I got, right? Especially with my full-time school and full-time job, like I don't have any time for volunteering hours right now. So I was doing that online. But how big of a portion do they look at for admission into law school? And like
So
how
I
many
think it's about having like a well-rounded scope of experience. So,
Okay.
volunteering in the legal profession or in the legal world doesn't necessarily have to be at a law firm, right? So if
Yeah.
you're volunteering at a crisis response, if you're volunteering at a women's shelter, if you're volunteering for the homeless, if you're volunteering in like an addictions outreach, needle exchange, any sort of area in which you're working with marginalized communities, racialized communities, impoverished communities, people
Yeah.
who are experiencing addiction, mental health. I mean, really, this is what feeds into the criminal justice system. So
Yeah.
before you even get to be practicing as a lawyer, if you have the experience of working with the type of clientele you can expect in the criminal bar, you're
Yeah.
already gaining the type of experience that a law firm would want to see. It doesn't have to be a law school, a law firm proper. And so that's what I tell a lot of undergraduate students, because as someone who runs a law firm, like undergrad students are just their work for me. They can't do the work that I need right now. They
Yeah.
can't go to court for me. They're not able to like properly organize the disclosure. I don't need someone just shredding paper in my office, body in my office that isn't necessary. But if I got someone, for example, like right now, I have 2 volunteers who have just finished their first year of law school. So I have
Yeah.
one student who just finished her first year at Osgood, and another from where is she from? Ottawa, University of Ottawa.
Okay.
And they're able to do the type of work that actually assists my firm. So that
Yeah.
volunteer opportunity made a lot of sense for both of us. They get to put my firm on their resume, and I get to actually have someone who can do some work of substance for me. So
Yeah.
it works out well. But as far as undergrad, you're not going to find a lot of law firms that are prepared to hire. So the question becomes, what type of law are you interested in? And if, I can tell you, every law firm wants someone who's prepared to give back, right? And so if
Yeah.
you're interested in a subset of social needs, then volunteer in that community.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks for your time.
No, thanks for the questions. They were great questions.
Thanks.
Thank you, Alicia. Those were very good questions. And before I open like the last 5 minutes up to any last minute questions, I do want to ask, I guess I know a lot of us are thinking to head into the direction of becoming lawyers and maybe even criminal lawyers like yourself. And I know this can be very exciting, but also worrisome. It's very daunting. So really quickly, if you have one piece of advice that you can give to, you know, the next generation of aspiring legal professionals, what would that be?
Just make sure you're doing it from a place of passion and that you're doing it because you want to help people. Because if you're just doing it to make money, you're not going to be happy, number one, and you're probably not going to make real money because your heart's not in it and you're not going to do the work that you need to build up. It takes a lot of time and effort to build a practice. People think they come out of law school and boom, now they're making like 6 figures and they're driving a Porsche and life is just pretty and fun and 9 to 5. And that is not real life at all. That said, if you love what you do, it doesn't feel like work. So if this is the profession that your heart is in, don't let anyone steer you away. And don't let anyone steer you away from criminal law because they don't want you interacting with criminals or defending those people. Those are the people you've got to just ignore and not care what they say. I'll tell you, when I was in law school, I always wanted to do criminal law, but because of my own history, I was convinced not to. My mom actually said to me, you spent most of your adult life as a criminal, you cannot be a criminal lawyer. And I listened and I went into civil litigation because I thought, well, that's okay. I'm dealing with employment and estates and corporate commercial and that's like clean cut. And 2 years in, I was miserable. I thought if I have to write another angry letter for a living, I'm jumping out a window. Except I worked in an office where you couldn't even open the damn windows because God forbid you got fresh air. And I just thought, you know what? This isn't for me. I need to do what I want. And I think, that's a message I have for students, no matter what profession you're going into. Like, don't become a lawyer because people think you should be a lawyer. Become a lawyer because you actually want to get paid to argue with people and you want to fight for the rights of people, or you want to put bad guys in jail, in which case you want to be a crown, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. We need those people too. The system needs both. So, I think that you have to understand yourself, understand your own personality, and just do what you want to do.
That's amazing advice. Thank you so much, Jordana. That is super, super insightful and definitely helpful. I think always working from having that passion in the first place is so much more important than money, of course. We have around like 3 minutes. There's a couple of questions in the chat.
Don't go to law school in the UK.
Okay. I have a lot of I've heard a lot of people tell me
don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. No. Telling you, it's your number one way to hurt your job prospects.
You're asking why?
Yes, why? Because it's seen as an inferior route to a law degree. It is seen as a quick route to a law degree, which suggests you're not prepared to put the real work in. If you're not prepared to do the work and put it, listen, there's a difference. If you're offered a place in Harvard or Stanford law, places that have like a serious reputation, by all means, you're never going to go wrong. But if you're doing your little 2-year program in the UK because it's quicker and it's easier, your employer is going to know that, right? You go to Bond University in Australia, no one's taking you seriously. Everyone knows you just spent 2 years on a beach. That's like the reality. So I definitely do your research. If it's a really reputable law firm, you will need to be able to answer why. Why did you go to the UK? Because there is an idea amongst lawyers that it is easier to get into school in the UK as well as Australia, and it would suggest that you were not able to get into any of the law schools in Canada. So if you have another reason, like you have family that lives in the UK and you wanted to go and experience life down there, is all like, that's great. You got to be careful with what law schools you're picking and why you're picking them.
All right, perfect. Yeah, guys, you heard it here first. Don't go to law school in the UK unless it's like reputable and you have a good reason.
Yeah.
Yeah. So does anyone have like any super last minute questions? We have like about a minute left. I know, Jordan, I know you have a super busy schedule, but if you want to put your contact information, if anyone else has other questions in the chat, you can go ahead.
Sure.
But
I mean, you can find me sort of everywhere. You can look up my name. You'll get to my website. You'll find me on Instagram. You'll find me on LinkedIn.
I have a huge following.
I don't love Twitter, so you won't find me there very much. But my handles for all my social media is just my name. So super easy to find me.
Perfect. All right. I think we have a couple more. I don't know which one to answer.
I'm gonna address Carla's about the LSAT. LSAT is super important to get into law school. It's for Osgood, it counts as 1 year of undergrad. So if you did a 4-year undergrad program and then the LSATs, your LSAT actually counts as 1 full year. So I'm not trying to overwhelm you, Carla. As you say, you're already overwhelmed or worried. Just practice, 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 practice. LSAT is all about a combination of speed and accuracy, and the way you improve your speed is just by practicing. So I used to have a buddy that I would practice with, and we spent 10 hours every Sunday just practicing nonstop. We would time each other. We would try to do things to distract each other, just to stay focused. So I strongly recommend just practicing. If you can afford it, I suggest taking an LSAT prep course. I did not, I could not afford it at the time. But I hear that it's really helpful in teaching people like tricks on how to improve their ability to take the LSATs. There's also an LSAT prep course that Osgood offers for students who can't afford other prep courses. It was not available when I was a law student, unfortunately, but I've known 2 or 3 people now that have come through that program and loved it. So anyone in Toronto should certainly think about contacting Osgood if they want to do. It's a summer prep course.
All right, perfect. Thank you so much for that advice. I know a lot of people are taking their LSAT soon, so definitely get to hear.
Good.
I think that is it for today.
Great.
I'd like to thank you so much for being here and talking about your career as a criminal defense lawyer. It was so insightful, and it was an honor for Pre-Law Shadowers to have you. And we're very grateful that you can give up some time out of your extremely busy schedule to join us. And good luck with all the cases.
Thanks so much. Good luck, everybody. Good luck on your LSATs, and hopefully I'll see you in court at some point.
Bye. Have a good night.
Take care, everybody.